And Trump 6 times now, 6 times, has floated the idea of going after U.S. citizens. Miami Herald reported the idea of focusing on naturalized U.S. citizens, which is U.S. citizen. But Trump, in 2 different interviews, said born here. Made it very clear, talking about people that were born here, and says, oh, if they bop a grandma on the head, it's irrelevant, the crime. The law is still, the constitutional rights are there regardless of the severity of the crime. He just wants to do that so you think, oh, you're supporting people that beat grandmothers? No, we support the Constitution.
The idea that we're doing Guantanamo 2.0 is devastating to me. So how do you see this whole immigration deportation? To me, I really don't have words. I don't have words for how bad this is.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, I mean, there's so many different parts that you get into and how this is being used, from the, the parts that add to the kind of police technocratic state that's building out, or the ICE, Gestapo, military, level funded kind of national police state, to outside influence. But just the thing that I'll start with that really jumps out at me that I'm concerned about is the unconstitutional nature of it. And again, it's so frustrating that we have to start with these kind of things and battle through all of the partisan nonsense about, for example, how immigrants don't have constitutional rights. The people that don't understand the Constitution, right? The idea, again, I'm sure you're aware that everybody in this country even is protected within constitutional rights. The Visa card holders, the green card holders, or somebody here illegally still has due process. This is an easily proven fact, right? And so the frustrating thing is that immediately they don't even go after the ones that might make sense. They go after Khalil. They go after Ozturk. And Khalil was, if it's very easy to see, Batar USA, groups that are out there that are directly tied to Israel, handing out pagers to people on the street, American citizens, are the ones that said, go after Khalil, get Khalil. They were tagging Bondi, they were tagging Trump, and then within days he was picked up. And we all see how this playing out now. They have nothing, right? But it's because he spoke about Israel. And so it became this really obvious momentum for Israel's benefit. Let's be clear about that they were going after things. Well, let's make it clear, violating constitutional rights that are foundational to this country. And then it crept further. Then we started seeing people with visas and green card. Well, they were examples of that, but on a mass scale, we started seeing people get picked up in the process of going through the actual process. So what we tell people they're supposed to do, somebody who shows up and goes, I want to be a U.S. citizen, and is going through this process. And because at that moment they don't have, they grab them and they deport them. Many of those people ended up in places like El Salvador, right? And then it crept even further. And Trump 6 times, has floated the idea of going after U.S. citizens. Miami Herald reported the idea of focusing on naturalized U.S. citizens, which is U.S. citizen. But Trump, in 2 different interviews, said born here. Made it very clear, talking about people that were born here, and says, oh, if they bop a grandma on the head, it's irrelevant, the crime. The law is still there. The constitutional rights are there regardless of the severity of the crime. He just wants to do that so you think, oh, you're supporting people that beat grandmothers? No, we support the Constitution. And so we're in this momentum right now where we're half a step away from that happening. And now there's a case right now, there's been many cases of the children, U.S. citizens that were deported, but there's been cases of U.S. citizens that were picked up that were moments away, this is in the earlier stages, from being sent to El Salvador. And if it wasn't for the Supreme Court holding that, they would be gone already. And they'd only found out afterward that they were in fact U.S. citizens. Why? Because there was no due process. They just didn't have their ID, for example. There was one I just covered, a U.S. citizen, a veteran, who was in California, and I think there's a reason this is kind of where it happened, who was working security at a cannabis farm, a legal cannabis farm. And they raided the farm, I think just because of what's going on and the focus on California, and they arrested him. They pepper sprayed him. They beat him. They didn't give him a moment to say he was a citizen. He was trying to. They didn't let him. They didn't give him a chance to show his ID. They arrested him. They detained him. They kept him in there for days. They claimed he was on suicide watch, which it made no sense. He missed his daughter's birthday. I mean, all this different stuff. And then they let him go, no charge. Because eventually it proved out that he was a U.S. citizen. But think about what that shows us about where we are right now. Of all people, the conservatives not being up in arms about one of the most obvious constitutional attacks I've ever seen in this country. It's terrifying, but there's plenty of other directions we can go in. But I just think that's like pressing right now for American citizens.
And it's wild, Ryan, that people are so freely willing to give away due process, because that is what's happening right now. And that it doesn't stop with immigrants. If you think that stops with immigrants, you are really fooling yourself. This is coming for all of us. And as you said, Trump's mentioned on numerous occasions that he would consider going after American citizens. And this is not something that this isn't Trump specific. This is something that they've been slow walking us into for some time now. And I think that that's what's so frustrating, is that if people had paid attention 10, 15 years ago, we may not have gotten this far. But that's why they are so effective, is that they know exactly how and when to push and when to pull back and when to make a move and when to not. And I think that that's what's so effective about their approach. But it's crazy to me that we are so willing. And again, I don't want violent gang members cruising the streets. I don't think any of us do. That's not who they're going after.
Right.
It's not, right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
The evidence is shockingly clear. I mean, and I've been combing through this from day one, through the court documents, not hypothetical statements, not whatever gnome or whatever people shout that you can prove are wrong immediately, but the actual information on the records of this, the facts, the court documents. And it was very clear. Let's just take the first example of El Salvador and the 200 something people they shipped. The vast majority of them, I think it was 70 something %, had no criminal record. And the majority of them were here legally. And that's the thing that just still doesn't seem to register for some people who support this. Here legally, they had no criminal record, and they were a Visa card holders, a green card holder, or in the process of one of them. And just so it's clear for those that don't care about this, seeking asylum is a legal process. The statements is always, well, if you don't like it, then change the process. The reality is right now that is the case. And so, people can abuse that. They can show up and claim they're seeking asylum, but it is still the reality. There's still legal structure there. And so many people that are in that process are being sent away. But the problem is, you're saying, they're going after the majority of which people are just, for example, somebody who had I think it was a visa and had a traffic violation from 5 years ago. And they said, poor visa, and they're just rounding these people up. And look, I think it's very obvious that there's a very clear overlap to something that involves Israel. I mean, we've seen many examples of this that are about people that are speaking about Israel. There are people that are getting called out because of social media posts, because they have a Palestinian flag. There are people coming in legally who have green cards that are being stopped because of a Palestinian flag on their social media and having their green card taken. Nothing, little things like that. Or even the big cases like Abrego Garcia. I mean, it's one of the most frustrating cases I've ever had to break down because of how willfully dishonest the highest levels of power are being, and people that want to lie about it, where this guy has the evidence they're claiming does not back it up. I'm not claiming he's a good person. I don't know everything about him, but the facts they're claiming are not true. Second, and most importantly, he wasn't given due process, and they violated a Supreme Court ruling by sending him back to El Salvador. The whole thing is so broken that now they're using an actual illegal immigrant who has violated the deportation laws more than once, or, immigration laws, and is actually guilty of trafficking. And he's in this country. He's the one that's testifying about Garcia, which is not going to hold up. The judge has called it out. It's wildly dishonest. It completely doesn't even add up. And they let him stay in this country so they could get rid of Garcia, a person who's not guilty of those crimes, or that they've dropped the charges on MS-13 leaders so they could be sent back because Bukele has a deal with them. None of this stuff gets discussed. It's inherently dishonest. And I think people are starting to see it, but a lot's going on in the world. And this is, I think, as I've been saying for a while, this is probably one of the most important things happening in this country to Americans because of the constitutional issue. I mean, this is foundational what they're attacking.
Yes, I agree 100%, because again, this isn't going to stop with immigrants at all. This is once you give, and we don't get it twisted, we are giving this right away. That is what we are doing by consenting to this happening to other people. Right. And once you give those rights away, we saw it with the Patriot Act. Once you give those rights away, you don't get them back, guys. You do not get them back. And I think what's so insane about what's happening here, I wish people would stop calling them deportations. It's not what this is. Deportation is taking somebody who's here maybe illegally from Venezuela and sending them back to Venezuela. It's taking somebody that's here from wherever and sending them back to the place in which they came from, not rounding people up. It's essentially extraordinary rendition. You're just rounding people up and then sending them off to some crazy maximum security prison in a third country. We're paying them to take all these people. And that's wild behavior. That's why I said it's the Guantanamo 2.0, because that's exactly what happened in Guantanamo. We just rounded people up based on dubious evidence that, you're a terrorist and we're going to send you off to some island and you're going to just live in prison for 15, 17, 20 years. There's still people there. Now we're sending immigrants there again. And it's just crazy how willing people are, Ryan, to consent to this stuff. It is it's crazy to me, especially given that we have historical reference for what this looks like.
Yeah, most definitely. And there's been more than one example now of the people they sent in that earlier batch who are now starting to come back. I mean, once that cracked because of Garcia, and it became very clear they were lying the entire time. There's a new article, by the way, from Washington Post, I think, that's saying from the data showing 1 in 3 of everything, basically most, I think it was something what was the percentage? There's a high percentage of what they've been doing in regard to the court cases have been fraudulent. Lies here, lies there, which is just wild to me. But the people with Garcia showing you that they, of course, they always could have had him back, but they pretended like they couldn't. And now Hernandez has come back, the barber, and it turns out like we early got a glimpse of, he was being beat and abused the whole time he was there. And he was an innocent person. It was because of the tattoo that they just assumed, or rather, I don't even think they assumed, they just used it to take him, because that's come out pretty strongly. They just, I think, like soccer tattoos, or his was a rainbow flag, for crying out loud, or rainbow something, or there's a musician that just got brought back. These are all because they probably have enough resources or somebody backed them enough to be able to get them back. But there's hundreds of people still there, Just disgusting what's happening. And I agree.
I think there was one tattoo. It was like an autism tattoo.
Right.
And
I think that was actually.
I have a child with autism. I don't have any autism tattoo. I wouldn't mind getting one. I don't know. The puzzle piece bothers me, but it was like an autism awareness tattoo, right. And they were like, "Oh, MS-13." No, it's crazy what is happening here, and it is. There's not much. I don't feel like there's much we can do about it. I mean, as you said, most people don't even know what's happening, or most people are grossly misinformed about what's happening. A lot of people think, I've heard several people say, they're just rounding up gang members. Like it's criminals. Like, obviously we want Yes, I want criminals off the street too. I don't want innocent people I don't even care if you're here illegally. If you're not bothering anybody, I don't want to see you get kidnapped and sent off to some prison in some third country and never seen from again. That's a crazy position to take. There's
a human just value aspect of this, right? Which is hard for some people to wrap their mind around, that they're human beings and they shouldn't be treated like anything else. But the point to make here for those that don't want to see this, it's the same thing I made right from the beginning, is that, look, let's just say you think they're only rounding up criminals. Okay, well, then that has to be verified, right? Mm-hmm. And they start, well, what do you mean? They're criminals. Well, how do you know that? Because you trust the government saying that? Like the insane reality that you're just letting them float that idea. The point is, in any context, they have to go, well, here's the reality. Here's how we know that. And here's why it's going to happen. That in any deportation, or the way this is happening today, that's obviously the case. So we already saw this going on, where they're saying, this person is X, Y, and Z, or rather the argument, we don't have to give them a process. I'm like, okay, what happens if you're a U.S. citizen who's got brown skin and board shorts, and you don't have your ID on you, and they just round you up? And the point is, well, there's no process. Well, that's already been happening, and this, you need to, I think if people just recognize that, like the person you're talking, they just don't seem to know. And I think the main thing is always the first step in solving any problem is simply acknowledging that it exists. We haven't even gotten there for some people. And I think that's like the first part, the problem, but I think that's changing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that what people need to recognize is that it's all about the precedent. Once the precedent is set, you're done. Like, that's over. And that's what's been so terrifying, watching so many of these things roll out, the Patriot Act, the arrest of Julian Assange. That is completely and irreparably damaged press freedom for decades, if not for forever. And I think that once you set that precedent, it opens up Pandora's box, and it just leaves everybody so vulnerable. And as you said, it's not just about immigrants. This is going to come for United States citizens. Donald Trump has been, just very loud about it. I mean, he's that's one good thing about Donald Trump, is he has no gift for subtlety whatsoever, and he will just often say things he probably shouldn't say out loud. It's a little silver lining to his presidency, is that he is so blunt and doesn't know when to shut up sometimes, and that's good, because at least then we know what the plan is and what they're doing. But yeah, it's crazy to me that this has been so widely accepted by so many people, and I think that you're right. It's really just a matter of people just don't know, and there is so much happening, and I think that most people are so preoccupied with the fact that they can't feed their families, they can't afford to go to the doctor, they don't know how they're going to pay their rent, all of that stuff. And that's been the case for a long time, but I think it's especially prevalent right now. And I think people just do not have the bandwidth to even check into this stuff. And that's really but for sure, that's how they're able to get away with all of this stuff, because everybody is so preoccupied that they're not paying attention to the man behind the curtain. And that is really unfortunate.
Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Oxnard, California, Rutherford, New Jersey, New York, Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.